Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you might see a little link down below that you can actually jump into the Zoom conversation if you feel like it. So check that out. Also, if you're here for the first time, let me show you around a little bit. If you're here, if you've just come, this is the first time, welcome. Glad to have you. You'll see attendees and panelists. You're probably wondering, how do I become a panelist? You might be wondering that. You're looking at what we're talking about. You'll invariably, somewhere in the middle of this, will think that we're off kilter. We don't know what we're talking about, that you know better. And that's when you should jump in and talk to us. So we want you to become a panelist. We want you to come join us and join the conversation. If you feel like you've got something to add to this conversation, just make sure you've got good audio, good video, and good internet, and come on and join us. Now, we open the doors for that at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, between 6 and 6:30, we're not going to promise anything. We talk about all kinds of things. Sometimes, today we talked a lot about mics, but last week there was a whole conversation about drywall. So we can't promise anything between 6 and 6:30, but if you come, it's usually a fun conversation. Between 6:30 and 6:40, somewhere between there, we add the Discord link. Discord is where about 600 of us chit chat about this between all these shows. So if you want to join that, come here early. By the time I do this announcement, it's over. So the link has expired. You'll have to come back tomorrow. Between 6:40 and 6:45, we open we start doing mic checks. Once you see us doing mic checks, we're not adding anybody else to the panel for the day. So just take that into a check. You really should be here by 6:40 if you want to be on the panel. All you have to do is get here by 6:40, raise your Zoom hand, your little digital Zoom hand, blue hand, and we'll bring you in. And then we'll do the mic checks. From 7 to 8, we do open Q&A. So this is about anything around media production that you'd like. So you can ask those questions. Now, our job as panelists is to discuss these questions. Your job as an attendee is to ask the questions. We can't ask the questions. We don't have access to the Q&A tool that you have down below as soon as we join as a panel. So it's really up to you to keep the conversation going. So if you have a question, make sure to ask that question. If you see a question that you like, vote it up. We've got 194 people here, and I definitely don't think we have 194 votes distributed among those questions. So either vote on a question or ask a new question, but keep this conversation going. We're depending on you. So make sure to do that. Now, the second hour, we take different subjects, and we're going to have just questions about that subject. So today, it's going to be visual effects. I'm still experimenting with Mondays. It might be visual effects and graphics and all kinds of other things that we do on Mondays. Today is going to be an open discussion. So if you have specific questions about 3D or Unreal or photogrammetry or green screen, the second hour is the time to ask those questions. Then on Tuesdays, we talk about audio. Greg Herta, who is here, there he is. He's going to be talking about audio. He has been Foley mixing for a long time. He has just a little bit of experience on a lot of movies. And so Greg's going to be sharing some wisdom with us on tomorrow morning between 8 and 9. On Wednesday, we've got Chris Summers. Chris is going to be talking really about all the camera releases that we've had. Chris usually covers cameras or covers some version of cameras, and we've got updates from Blackmagic and Canon and Sigma. So we're just going to have an open discussion about all these updates and what they mean and how they compare to each other. Thursday, we've got special guest Renee Ritchie. Renee, I've been on MacBreak for a long time, and Renee is also he has his own YouTube channel. He's been a blogger, and he's going to really talk about how he does what he does. So Renee's going to be here on Thursday to answer your questions related to that. Friday is the focus on education. So it's a 1-hour discussion with on education. Now, one thing that didn't go in the newsletter I realized yesterday is that we are, just a note, we're opening a second hour for education on Saturday. So Saturday, the second hour of Saturday will be education as well. It's because the 1 hour of Friday is definitely not enough. We had so many questions. We didn't get to the end of them. And so what we're going to do is open a second hour. So we'll do Friday from 8 to 9 and Saturday from 8 to 9 will be in education. I apologize. I didn't get that into the I realized as we were building that yesterday, I didn't put that in there. So anyway, so that'll be there. Also remember that on Thursday, we have a third hour with Oliver Breidenbach, who is talking about Memo Live. And so anyway, so that's what we have coming up. And now it's time for the questions. Chris, what do we got?
Good morning, Alex. Hope you had a good weekend. By the way, I see 10 questions in the Q&A panel. Do you see that?
I see 11.
Interesting.
There we go.
Okay, I'm going to start with TJ Asher. And TJ wants to know if Bill Davis would explain his new setup to others, both the audio and the video. Sounds great. Looks great, Bill.
Yeah, it looks
Thank
great.
you. Thank you. So I've been working on this for a while. The primary challenge for me was this is my working office. This is where I do video production. And in fact, if I can share my screen real quick, let me see if I can give you a picture. Whoops, we're disabled, so I'd have to get
Okay,
basic. What?
You got
Oh.
co-host now.
Okay, thanks. So share screen. Here is a picture of my normal, is that coming through okay? Office. And I've been building out the capability to do video while I don't damage the capability to work with clients, because in this photo, you're actually sitting where clients would be sitting. So I needed to keep the geometry of all this stuff going, and I needed to be able to get things out of the way. You'll see a mic arm, and essentially what I did was added 2 additional ones that have lighting in front of me, plus build a little riser under the main monitor where I have a Blackmagic 6K now pointed at me, and it's in a mini teleprompter, which I will eventually end up using to be able to look straight in the camera for a little better eye contact, because I've been noticing that I tend out in the voice booth to look down because my camera is high. So that's why. As to lighting, I have a couple of small panel lights that are about 10 inches wide by 4 inches high that are on articulated arms. The reason for that is so that I can move them out of the way of the monitor when the clients are in and move them back in when I'm doing a Zoom thing. I've got a couple of Dracast lights, 10-inch panels that are using for background fill. And then I've got a little really inexpensive, let me get out of the screen share here. Stop share. Little really inexpensive 160 newer lights that I'm using for rim lights, because I noticed that my hair is dark and the background is dark. So I was losing my hair on my shoulders, particularly when I wear what I normally wear, which is dark t-shirts. And I do that because I grew up in Arizona. So I have a really active self-cooling system. And so if I'm wearing a light shirt, I find I tend to get pit stains, not to be too delicate about it. So I'm hoping I can get enough rim light on my shoulders and stuff like that so I can go back to something that will show a little of that less. So that's kind of an overview.
That's great. Thanks, Bill. Next question.
Next question, Mickey, our own Mickey says, oh, what are the go-to brands for PTZ cameras? On top of this, are there any brands or models noteworthy for high sensitivity, low light? It has to be IP65 rated.
Stuart?
Hikvision security cameras, IP cameras, they've got a PTZ module. If you have a look at Lab Padre on YouTube, which is one of the ones looking at the SpaceX Boca Chica facility, he uses a couple of them, so you can check them out. They do have night vision modes, and you can turn off the infrared filters in them.
The ones that we've used the most for PTZs have been the Sony BRC 900s, but the BRC 1000s is what we started putting into a lot of the kits, because it's got a 1-inch 4K sensor that looks pretty good. The advantage of the newer, and I believe that the Panasonic 150s, is that they can send telemetry data back to Unreal. And so for being able to sync backgrounds and so on and so forth, that's an interesting thing that we haven't been able to test, but we know that it's there. And so what we see the most in corporate environments, at least, and a lot of other bits and pieces and things that we've used, we had a kit with BRC 900s for a long time, just because it was great that we could set up 2 operators and run a 3-camera or 4-camera shoot relatively effectively. And they've got crazy 20x lenses on them, so that they're pretty powerful as far as all-in-one. So I think as all-in-ones, those are what we've used for extreme low light or very low light. We've tended to match up the Canon ME200s and in one case the ME20 to telemetrics heads. So that's not an all-in-one solution, but that is a a PTZ pair that is both very expensive and very effective. So, you know, you can with an ME20 on a telemetrics, you're talking about a $35,000 kit for one camera. But what it can see things that you can't see in color. So it is an incredibly powerful kit. If you're really looking for it. So I'm just going to give you the whole scale of things of what you can do, starting with the Panasonics and the Sonys and all the way up. Go ahead.
What is the last one? The last model you mentioned? It's hard to cut while taking down notes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a Canon ME20. It's just a box. You know, it's a sensor. You know, and
gotcha. This is the yeah, I remember seeing these.
There's an ME20 that's $20,000 per unit. There is an ME200, which is what we invested in because it's only $5,000 a unit. The ME20, I believe, ME200, I believe, goes to 1 million ISO or something very close to it, and the ME20 goes to 4 million ISO. And what they did is it's only 1080p. So they gave it a full frame, a Super 35 and a full frame sensor that were committed to 1080p, which means the sensor sites are much, much larger, which dramatically reduces the errata and makes it much more light sensitive. And so, and it's anyway, so that's those are like, if you're looking for real low light and you're willing to spend into it, you know, the telemetrics heads are the best that we've worked with as far as that goes. You just got to figure out what weight you need to put on, you know, and the controllers are good and everything else. But that's a kit. It's not a all-in-one, and it takes some, you know, engineering to keep it going sometimes. But it does lens control and, you know, all kinds of other things we can control. You know, everything that, you know, if you hack on a big lens on the front of it, it's still going to talk to the Fujinon and the Canon lenses through their motors. So you can do all of that through the telemetrics head. Again, that's what we've used for most of our higher end stuff when we want to put a PTZ in. But then in the middle was the Sony and the Panasonics, and then Stuart. I don't know where the Hikvision. Where does that sit from a cost perspective?
That's bargain basement. IP cameras for security camera.
Right.
They're actually made in China. One other thing, noting Mickey's other question further down the page was about FLIR. Maybe have a look at DJI for that one. And
there's some. There's also some not military companies that serve military solutions. I think there's I want to say an X27 that is, I believe it's the X27 that and I can't think of the name of the company that makes it right now, that does true night vision, you know, and they're running about $15,000-$20,000 a unit. And I haven't gotten to use them. I've seen the tests of them, but I haven't gotten to use one yet. George, then Paul, then Mickey.
I want to second the Panasonic 150s. I actually have 2 jobs coming up in the next couple of days that I bidded on. And I could have used my Black Magics, but because of coronavirus, I'm going with the PTZs that a couple of friends of mine own and cross-renting to just get them in the back of the room, and you could shoot like they're 20 times. So you could definitely get them in the back of a facility and get some good use out of it from the back of a room. So those are pretty good.
Yep. Paul?
Yeah, the camera that Jesse's using is a Wise. It's they have an IP65 PTZ version. It has 2-way audio. Pretty decent. I mean, you can look at Jesse and see the quality, and it's $30 for their PTZ version. You can buy a little cover for it. Even you can cover it. I've got about 30 of them at a rental property that I own, and they're totally reliable. They've been outdoors for months, maybe over a year.
One thing I'll say though, sorry, you guys want to hear about the PTZ? So I've got both the PTZ and the non-PTZ. Once you put the firmware update on the security camera to turn it into a web camera, the PTZ does not work anymore. And even though the coloring's pretty good, the frame rate is not as good as a typical camera. But yeah,
that's always the challenge. Frame rates are always the big thing that gets you. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, well, thanks for the suggestions. Alex, are the Sonys, are they weather resistant? Are they IP65 rated?
No.
Okay.
So
these are actual
you have to
production
put them,
cameras.
They're production cameras. I do believe that there are some that are made that way, but I haven't. These aren't IP65. I'm just explaining what we use. And
Gotcha.
we've sheltered them, for.
Yeah, I would imagine maybe building some sort of plexiglass enclosure for it or something.
We've done a lot of metal and just plexiglass in the front, but we've sheltered a lot of these, and we found them to be. I haven't found an all-weather one that has the same focal quality. Like the visual quality
Gotcha.
hasn't been as high. So we usually build enclosures for them as opposed to using the ones that are built for the outdoors. Just because that they haven't, I feel like they've invested in making sure that it's IP65 and not invested in making it look good. Guy and then Beju.
Yeah, I have a set that was just from Costco a few years ago that actually works really well. It is IP65, and I mean, it's got a crazy zoom. I mean, this is live video that you're looking at across the street, and as soon as it focuses here, I mean, it's bananas how I could control all these cameras from anywhere in the world. And this was just a cheap system from Costco. This app is called QC, and so that's the zoom, and then I can pan. There's the entrance. But cool stuff. I mean, for cheap too. I mean, this whole camera I think was $900 for the PTZ in the enclosure. I couldn't find it I bought it off of Amazon, or I bought a second one off Amazon, but you can find them, at Costco right now. And then this app is Q-SEE. That's
great. Just to give some background on, I put in a series of questions. I'm helping a construction company allow their engineers to remotely monitor and look at the progress of their builds of large towers.
I've done some construction of shooting. There's a couple things. One is you need multiple angles because they'll keep blocking things with what they're constructing.
We're looking at 3 to 5 dozen cameras.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then the other thing is that time lapse is surprisingly powerful in this case. So. You'll notice things. We were analyzing the efficiency of a construction site with cameras and so on and so forth. And what we thought was really interesting was there's just things you see happening on the construction site that you will not see in real time. We were watching one, and we noticed the guy was walking 25 feet to his tool chest, and you wouldn't notice it in a day-to-day, but if you take the entire day and you switch it down, you watch him go like this the whole time, and he's using up time, and so we just pulled it, can we pull that tool chest a little closer to you to speed things up, and when they were constructing some of the stands, we were watching how people were putting together. And so you can definitely see a lot of efficiencies, and see things that are happening in when you speed it up in a way that we didn't see when it was in real time. So it's a really time lapse at construction sites, and then periodic drone flyovers is useful as well.
Yeah, we might end up using a mixture of maybe the surveillance type stuff, and then a couple of the higher end like the Sonys on things that we need detail on.
Yeah, there's a lot of hardened
concrete pours and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're going to 15 seconds, Beju, and then 15 seconds, Jesse. We're going to move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if you want cameras which have outdoor enclosures, Canon has a few outdoor PTZs, which are very popular for sports broadcasters with long zooms. Mm-hmm. And you might find ready-made casings which are used for basically moving heads, which might work for other cameras which have IP74 enclosures.
Jesse, 15 seconds.
I think it's just really interesting. There's so much innovation on the security camera front, and not expensive prices, but with webcams, there's just the Logitechs from 6 years ago.
Well, but still, the security ones oftentimes don't still have great frame rates. That's what Logitech does really well. Shutter speed, and we're going to keep moving. Next question.
Brett Ramsey says, I have a client who wants to do a series of Zoom forums similar to office hours. They do not have the funds for the webinar feature as used here. What would be the best way to do this and promote it to the general public?
I think you just need somewhere to register, folks. I mean, you need a web page or something. You could probably use even Eventbrite or a variety of things. You just need to figure out how you're going to set up their access, within meetings, to make that work. I think it depends on how many people you have coming in as to what you can afford or not afford, related to that. I mean, because I think you're at 100, right, for meetings in its most basic form. so, or Meetings Pro or whatever. Does anyone else have any? I mean, I think that, but you would need something that you're going to be able to collect, and that's a variety of services. And then you can, you still should be able in Zoom meetings to, there's a couple different ways of doing that. If you're trying to control it, you can either just send those. I mean, I know a lot of organizations that just send out, they just send the email to only the people that are there. If they shared it, it wouldn't be as but there are some that actually authenticate that, and make sure that those emails are taken. So it just depends on how they approach that. Jeffrey and then Leland.
If it's not high security, then you can always shuttle them to like a YouTube, like an unlisted channel or a Facebook group or something like that, and then do a streaming into that, and then have them do pre-questions so you know which people to invite to the main Zoom webinar. And then that way that'll keep the numbers down, and you'll have an area where people can watch.
Go ahead, Leland, and then we're going to move on.
Yep. Yeah, and Google Hangouts is always free if you just need a forum place to sit and hang out. But as far as getting the people to the event, I would highly recommend you give yourself at least a week or two notice. Don't expect to go out on a live broadcast where you're going to get people to come to a show and just advertise the day before and say, hey, everybody, come to my event. We're going to be putting it on Saturday or Thursday. Make sure you give yourself a week or so of time.
And if you're also doing meetings, just remember everyone's turning their mic on. Now we're kind of the high water mark for what something looks like in Zoom, but know that, we try to test almost everybody that comes into our events to make sure that it's clean. So just know that meetings means that you're kind of doing that. Paul, real quick.
Okay, yeah, there's a whole bunch of new alternatives: Adobe Connect, Big Marker, Goto Webinar, Livestorm.
Yeah,
there's
I wouldn't
a lot
do
of
that.
these.
Yeah, they're just not
right now.
They're 1/10 the utility of Zoom. So I wouldn't go down to another path. You have time and quality are two things that you should take into account when you do this. So I mean, I use all of these all week. If you're trying to do a meeting, like a roundtable meeting, like what we're doing here, there's nothing like Zoom. There's a lot of reasons, vertical reasons to use Skype, which we use to use a lot of other things. But I will say for a meeting like what we do here, the reason we do it here is because there's nothing else that's close. Like it's not close right now.
A lot of wannabes. There's a lot of wannabes.
I would say Zoom is 4 out of 10. I think I put this on a tweet. Zoom is 4 out of 10, and everything else goes down. And I think we put whatever the Amazon one is at -10. But it's all But Zoom is probably the next. If Zoom is 4 out of 10, I would say the next closest one is 1 out of 10.
I hear
which
you.
is
I hear
so
you.
it's yeah. So anyway, next question.
Michael Tucker says, along the same lines, using Zoom for remote parliament, government meetings, what are the security issues that inhibit Zoom as a conference platform? So said, Alex, you just said it was 4 out of 10. What would push it to 10 out of 10?
Oh, the 10 out of 10 is just feature sets. It's not security. I mean, you can make Zoom overly secure. I mean, you can turn all the dials up. So for instance, you can, what happens is what we have as clients, especially with something like Parliament, we deal with being pulled 2 different directions with government entities, which is that they have a demographic that doesn't want to learn the tech, and then they have a need for security, and the 2 of them don't always get along. And so the issue is that you want to make sure that people are pre-registered. You want to check against their email. You want to be able, there's all these places in Zoom, all these dials that you can close down and make it, really, really tight, and make it as secure as anything else you're going to find. I mean, short of a government, some, government Cisco or, systems. But as far as something people can come in from home, you can make Zoom as secure as anything else, but you have to turn all those dials up, and then you have to do the wetware development with the participants so that they're willing to go through those hops. They have to join with, and you can really tighten it up. So I don't think that the security issues aren't there. It's just that every time you add security, it makes it harder for people to join. And then you have, a parliament, someone there in the house that can't get in, is upset and thinks that technology is stupid, and is calling someone above your head and screaming at them. And so those are the issues that you have that I have as often. So anyway, we've done a lot of these meetings that we've had to turn the security below our recommendations because we just can't get the demographic in that's trying to do that. But there's no reason why it can't be used. There's a lot of government agencies that are using it, and we've done it in the past. And the concerns that were there before, many of those were closed up, at the beginning of June, and they keep on tightening, all those bits and pieces. Next, anyone else have any other comments about that? All right, next question.
All right, next question. I'm going to summarize because it's almost 7 lines. How do you choose to calibrate an audio system? Where's the best time and use for pink noise?
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, the best use for pink noise is actually in flattening out the frequency response of a room. Pink noise is all frequencies at the same level. So it's used primarily for EQing a room or EQing a system. It can also be used to gauge speaker placement, like in a 5.1 system, with the loudness for each one. But the most effective way to do gain stages from pieces of equipment to each other, one by one, is tone. Typically 1K, although 1K is just so obnoxious. A lot of people use 400. But the tone is the way to calibrate equipment in stages.
It's so funny. I literally can work at it. I've listened to tone for so much that you can turn it on and I'll forget that it's there because my brain just completely, yeah.
Thank you, Mickey.
My 1K tone, and it's funny because what I find, Brian Maddox, who's not here today, when he's doing tests in a show, he doesn't like 1K. He wants to know it's his partially, and I think he doesn't like 1K like you, and so he does 800, and it bothers me the whole time because my brain is going, this is not 1K, this is not 1K, this is not 1K. And I'm like, what is it? What are we doing here? Why is this not 1K? It's like that dial on. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jeff.
Alex, before we do this, I want to clarify one thing. A. Mitchell's question said about using pink noise to calibrate gain stages.
Right. That's what we were. Yeah. What we were discussing was that the pink noise is to calibrate the room, but the tone is to calibrate. Yes. It should be used to calibrate gain stages. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jeff.
I was going to say that if you want to calibrate, if you don't want to calibrate every single time, then you calibrate a new room. And then if you move anything majorly in that room, then you might want to recalibrate, but those will keep you in the safe zone. And then of course, calibrating maybe once a month or something like that, you should be fine if it's in all high end.
I'm always in some locations, so it's just part of the process. You calibrate, you just hear pink noise for an hour at some point. Go ahead, Jeff.
Generally calibrating downstream stages, so anything that is mic level, past the mic level, so line level stuff through the mixer into amplifiers. Generally, we're using tone for that, and we're looking to set the nominal level to be the same, but we're also looking at what the headroom of the individual boxes are to align them. So if you have a box that has limited headroom, you're aligning it with something that has more headroom. The only caveat I will give to that, when we get to amplifiers, if you're running your amplifiers wide open and you tend to be running your mix bus lower because everything's just far too loud, oftentimes we'll trim the amplifiers back to just reduce noise in the system.
Yeah.
Jumping back to the beginning, microphones on sources will generally set gain staging there at the mic preamp, and that's something we're doing, generally looking at a meter. So we're using the actual source that's there. Pink noise is just a representative source because it gives us equal amounts of lows versus mids versus highs the way we hear, because it's balanced with equal energy per octave, and we hear in octaves.
That's great. That's perfect. Bill, and then Mickey.
Oops. Just really quickly, the whole idea of, just for the people who are watching who are beginners, of gain stages, you start with a signal, it goes to another box, you want to make that optimal, it goes to some other stage, you want to make that optimal. So gain staging is actually kind of an almost algorithmic thing. Start at the source, move to the next stage, get that right, move to the next stage, get that right. When you finally get to wherever the signal is going, if you got that right, then everything is right. It's balanced.
And the big thing what you're trying to avoid is zigzag. zigzagging, giving one box a low signal and then ramping it up and then sending it to another one. And then zigzagging is the thing that just annihilates your sound. You get a lot of noise. Greg, go ahead and jump back in, and then Mickey.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is you have to balance the output of one thing to the input of the next thing. So you have to know exactly what the new thing wants to see.
Right.
Okay. If the new thing wants to see mic level, you can't feed it line level.
And the one thing to underline with one thing that Jeff said is that you're always, just remember, as you build a chain, you're always lowered to your lowest common denominator. The worst piece of equipment in your pipeline is going to limit what you can do with your entire pipeline. It doesn't matter. You can have a CalRec on the front end, and if you have some little cheap converter somewhere on the way out, it completely lowers what's possible. So just remember that's the issue. Mickey?
Yeah, I just want to add that very generally speaking, of course, this varies from setup to setup and how complex the setup is. But typically, you want to be adjusting on the way into your mixer, you want to be adjusting your gain at the first gain stage, so your mic pre. And then everything after that on the way to the mixer would be at unity, all lined up. So you only have to worry about your first stage. And then again, very generally speaking, on your way out, you want your first devices after your mixer to be at unity. And then you adjust at your final stage, which would be, I don't know, your headphone preamp or your whatever monitoring device you're using. Of course, it would change from setup to setup.
Right. Greg, last 15 seconds.
Yeah, and if I just add one more thing, one of the biggest problems is dealing with professional equipment and consumer equipment because they tend to have different reference levels. Yeah. And you have to know what each one wants. One piece of gear might want to see -12 as a reference level. Another piece of gear might want to see -18, and a third one wants to see -20. So you have to know what the reference levels of each of those pieces are, because in effect, -12 equals -18 equals -20.
Yeah, that's great.
Depending on the gear.
Right. Absolutely. Great. Next question.
Mike Henderson says, how important is the in-body stabilization in Sony's mirrorless line, the A6500 and A6100? In-body stabilization.
I think it's the little, it's got a sensor. Yeah, go ahead, Beiju.
Yeah, the IBIS is really handy, especially if you're using handheld video, because it really stabilizes the micro shakes out. And the nice thing is, especially if you're using it with the converted lenses, like if you're using it with a Canon converter or something, which are non-stabilized lenses, it stabilizes them a little bit, at least on 3 axis, if not all 5. So it makes a nice difference, especially if you're doing tele shooting.
That's great. Stuart?
I noticed there was the start of a hint of a few questions about what it actually is. The IBIS in both the Panasonic, the Sony, and some of the Pentax cameras is actually moving the sensor a very small amount to track as objects move. They also have optical stabilization in the lens where they move some of the lens elements. And finally, there's a vector math element, which is where Panasonic get their 5-axis stabilization, where they do the movement across the sensor surface of the image to stabilize it further.
That's great. Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I just got a 6400 because I'm going to be using it here in a study situation. It's not a big deal. But if you're going to go take it in the field to do some video shooting, either get yourself a lens that has some stabilization, which will help, or better yet, a gimbal, which will be able to take care of that for you. But, if you're going to be shooting a lot of video, definitely go for the 6500 if you're going to be in the field running and gunning.
Phil, and then Sky.
Yeah, just anecdotally, I've got the 6600 that I'm using here for my webcam, but I've used it just for some shooting, and it's saved me a couple of times just handheld. It's handy to have, but I wouldn't lean on it.
Right. Sky?
Definitely handheld because it takes the shakes out, so it's great for out in the field. But make sure to turn it off when you have it on a tripod, because it will continue to move on its own.
And that's the nature of a lot of times you're weighing with the image stabilization, whether you want drift or not. We see that even with longer lenses, although the more modern like box lenses were pretty good at it, but you can see some of that drift there. Oftentimes I'll take the drift over the shake. Like micro shaking in a box lens for like a 90x box lens is something that drives me absolutely crazy at corporate events. And so I'd rather have it drift a little bit than have that little shake, because it affects my compression. Like little shake like that is horrible for compression, especially with an LED wall. Anyway, next question.
So I just picked up IBIS stands for in-body image stabilization.
Yep.
Wow, I learn stuff every day here.
Every day.
A. Mitchell says, aside from the lack of audio in its widget form, what don't you like about Slido as a parallel chat question system? What features is it missing or doing wrong? What are other impressions of this service?
I haven't used Slido for a while.
Or Slido.
Slido. I think Slido. I haven't used it for a while. The last time I used it didn't have the back end tools that I have with what I'm building. So I'm more interested in the front end tools. I feel like is commoditized. You can do whatever you want. I mean, everybody does the same thing. It's the back end tools that are important. And so, and I don't think that most people pay much attention to that. So, anyway, so I haven't used it for, when it first came out, I used it, I played with it a lot, and I haven't played with it since. I just looked at it and went, nope. Yeah, so and admittedly, I've been working on Q&A systems for 12 years, and so I'm pretty picky about weird little things. But I to pick at it directly, I think I would need to use it again, and I just haven't had the opportunity to turn it on because I've been using my own for a long time. Next question.
Phil says he's using the NDI HX camera on the iPhone to send video back to his Mac. It's getting clipped, and I confirmed with him he means cropped at the bottom. Any ideas?
Let me show you this. Check this out.
It's got stuff visual.
Yeah, so you see that black band at the bottom? Can you see there?
And it's just at the bottom.
It's just at the bottom.
How does this video get into Zoom?
It's iPhone, the NDI NX app, HX camera app, go into my Mac.
Straight into the Mac?
No, though, it's using the Sienna NDI monitor on the Mac.
So I would love for you to try that going through something like Memo Live and just see if it's still cropped. That way it would tell us whether it's the HX cam or whether it's the NDI, because I have not seen that with Memo.
The reason
memory serves, it's actually the HX cam that's the issue. We saw this before. We experimented with it a month ago.
So what do I use instead? What can I do that with something else?
But try it with Memo and just see if it shows up. If you see that black, because I know that a couple months ago when we started playing with this and I opened it up, I didn't see that at all. So I would have noticed that black bar pretty quickly. So I didn't. Well, I definitely did not.
One side or the other.
Jesse right now is using it, I think. Jesse, are you using it right now?
Yes, I am. I just have a iPhone XR, and it seems to not have that bottom bar.
And is that through Memo?
So it's through virtual input, NDI virtual input, just from the phone. You know, you connect to the same network, pull up the NDI.
But on your computer side, what's pulling it?
It's just the NDI.
NDI virtual input, just the tool itself. That's it, and right into Zoom.
All right. So I'll try to eliminate that. Yeah.
Yeah, my guess is that's probably in the software.
I'll report back.
It's likely from iOS device to iOS device. It probably isn't handling the slightly different aspect ratios correctly. That's a guess.
Jeffrey and Stuart, real quick.
I was going to say, I believe it's the Sienna that's causing the problem because it can't resolve the iPhone right. So go to the NDI tools and use that, and I think you'll get a better result.
That's perfect. That was my guess. That was gently saying. Stuart.
Just one quick question on the phone. Is the phone a 16 by 10 or a 16 by 9 screen, and does the camera maximize to the screen resolution?
No, it's full screen, but it's the Pro. Yeah, so it's probably the wrong aspect ratio. Yeah.
So what generally happens, except for Zoom, is the phone's sensor, I believe, is 2x3, not even anything close to the screen. So when you see full screen, typically it's cropping the top and the bottom and scaling the horizontal to fit. And so you'll notice that when you take stills, that's part of why you get a wider view there vertically. And so what it's doing is not cropping that correctly. a Zoom is one of the few things that doesn't do it. Interestingly enough, we found that Zoom does do it correctly on the iPad, but not on the iPhone, which we don't know why. Anyway, next question.
So this is an interesting situation, Alex. Mickey, our own Mickey, who works very hard for us. Thank you, Mickey. He's got like a whole bunch of PTZ questions. I was wondering if maybe you want to deal with those now, maybe make a PTZ hour.
No, let's answer them quickly because it's not just Mickey. So the thing is that people are voting them up.
No,
so people there once there's a bunch of votes, they're everybody's question. They're not Mickey's questions.
That's why
people
I
didn't want to hear
them
it.
in a separate question. So that
No, it's perfect. So
can...
people chose what they want to. Mickey has a bunch of questions, but it's not equal. It's and if you're watching and going, why are we getting all these PTZ questions? It's because you guys voted on them or didn't vote on the other ones. You gotta your vote matters. Probably here more than almost anywhere else. I'll leave it at that.
So back to the PTZ. Oh, and now Victoria's question got voted past it. All right, but on to something else. Beginner question: when selecting background scene colors for single person backgrounds, are there any tried and true rules when considering skin tone?
I generally go cooler in the background than warmer. I mean, that's generally my approach, is cooler or neutral. And it's harder to have people, their skin tones look as good when you put them in front of a warmer background. So you see Chris has a kind of a cooler background. Jeffrey has kind of a lot of these ones that they're either neutral or cooler. But when you go warmer, I think people's skin tones kind of tend to fall into that background or compete with it. They tend to look a little more pale. So that, yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I also remember seeing movie posters using those two colors, like Chris Fenwick has, and that's the skin tone versus the blue background. So
it's the orange teal trick, and there's a lot of and by the way, this is not my iMac camera today. My iMac camera died. I think I can get it back, but I have to reboot. There's great tutorials. As a matter of fact, I just shared one with Tucker yesterday, and I will post it in the chat. And it is it's a great tutorial on how to do the orange teal look.
But the bluish, purplish behind a human is the most popular thing that I've seen in broadcast. I pay a lot of attention to them.
You talk about brightness contrast, but it's also color contrast.
Yep.
By and large, most humans' skin is not blue. And
by and large.
By and large. And another interesting thing, and I find this fascinating, that if you look at a vector scope there, and I've said this before, if you look at a vector scope, there is a line up to about 10 o'clock, and that is called the flesh tone line. And regardless of race, all flesh tone lands roughly on that line.
Yep. So you're just going the other direction.
And teal is the other way.
Right. No, so yeah. Next, go ahead, Bill, and then we'll move on.
Just a little anecdote about what Chris was just saying. I once was talking to a colorist from Technicolor, and he told me the reason that all happens and it all works, regardless of ethnicity, skin tone, or anything else, is that it's actually not reading your skin tone, it's reading the blood.
The blood, yeah.
And everybody has exactly the same color blood.
Except the Vulcans.
Yeah, well, there's that. You have orange behind the Vulcans. All right, so we're now going to move into speed round. We're running out of time, and we still got a bunch of questions, and so we'll accelerate the pace.
All right, Michael Cool says, I'm an attendee today, and I really miss the 720p resolution that I had as a panelist. I know my clients would also appreciate 720p. Can Guy talk about the minimum hardware I would need to get a Zoom room working with my Zoom calls?
Go ahead, Guy.
I'm running it on an old 2013. Well, I was initially running it on a 2013 MacBook, and now I'm running it on a i7. It depends on how many monitors you want. If you look at the specs on the Zoom webpage, you'll see the minimum specs. So it's tough to say what you're driving, because there's an NVIDIA card that I'm using that'll drive 2 or 3 monitors, and if you just want the one, it'll saturate basically that one monitor. But yeah, I'd say just jump on the the webpage for Zoom and check it out.
And the caveat as we start this new Q&A system that I'm playing with is that the 720 is going out to YouTube. So it's not going out to it's a weird thing that we're in right now is that the attendees are seeing 640 by 360. YouTube is seeing 720. And so as the Q&A thing stabilizes, as my little Q&A tool stabilizes, we'll see what attendees do, because you could theoretically be in the chat and doing Q&A and everything else and getting pretty much the same experience you're getting in Zoom, but watching YouTube. And so that's kind of a, I haven't figured out what that means.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It might mean that people, because the chat and discussion is outside of the Zoom environment, it might mean that more people gravitate toward watching even live on YouTube and using the chat and stuff.
And listening and through the app itself. And so we're kind of looking at ways. The other thing about virtualizing that chat is it means that the chat and we could stream it to everything and have everybody just use so we could stream it to Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and everything else, and everyone's still on the same chat window. They're all still interacting with each other across all the platforms.
Does that make your participant?
Does it make your participant numbers a bit more complicated, because now you got two sources that you got to calculate? I'm
not calculating them. We make them. I'm interested in however many people show up. I mean, as long as we're getting the questions and the thing. I mean, I do look at it to see if overall, but I know that I know I'm already accounting for the fact. Like, for instance, what I'll be looking at is how many people join the app, not how many people. So I'm interested in how many people are actually interacting with the conversation, not how many people see it in one place or another. But I will pay attention to all of them just to see what kind of numbers we get, and also it would allow us to check view times, across multiple platforms, and compare it. We know that in the past, our chat systems have been dramatically different than the base. When we did a couple tests with the Final Cut user group as an example, and exact same video going to Facebook, YouTube, and then that YouTube one being embedded into the Q&A system. Facebook was 26 seconds average view time. YouTube was 6.5 minutes average view time, which is about the kind of what we would normally expect, between the two. And then in the question system, it was 37 minutes. It's not like incrementally better. It is like all better. So, and so we know that, creating interaction, we've known that for years, that you create that interaction and a lot of magic happens. And so we're just trying to figure out how to create that interaction, and where they see the video is less important to us. Chris?
Is that because of distraction, do you think, or do you think it's usability?
No, it's usable. It's distraction in the sense that when we're boring, there's lots of chat going on, and there's questions, and there's people thinking about things, and there's other things. Having a lot of things happening in front of you it keeps you going.
No, I mean the Facebook distraction. Do people see that?
The feed. It's the feed.
Do they have to click in to see it, or can they scroll past it?
No, what happens is that the feed is, they just have somewhere to go. Literally, Facebook is like a heartbeat away from you going somewhere else. It's just, and getting some more content. YouTube has a longer stick because it's somewhere to go, right? There's not like a YouTube feed in the same way. I mean, you could go find another video, but it takes more work. Facebook, it's like effortless to be out of it. Twitter, it's like effortless to be out of it. And that has a huge impact on view time. And to me, all I care about is view time. I feel like the number of viewers is a function of marketing. The view time is a function of the content quality. How and whether they feel like they're part of that conversation. The average view time in this Zoom is over 90 minutes, which is, if this happened on YouTube, and if it starts happening on YouTube, that's what that company writes case studies about. It's like, how do you have that kind of view time it's almost unheard of to have the kind of view time that we have here. But it's because we're discussing stuff, and people are involved, and they're chatting, and they're asking questions, and but it's a participatory conversation. It's a participatory media in a way that doesn't exist in a lot of other places. No, next question.
Michael Vosbein says, do you have any suggestions for streaming gear that could be accessible to non-pros, even kids with low budgets? I'm thinking of brands like Zoom, iRig, Rode, Switcher Studio for online music lessons.
Phones, iPads,
Yeah.
They all tie into all this stuff, and you can talk back and forth. You can zoom. A lot of them have them. I mean, I would simplify all these things. I mean, we've definitely done stuff with phones that have been very, I think that most of them do it fairly well, and they're relatively easy. That'd be the first place I'd go. If I can't do that, then it's a little webcam. But a lot of folks have phones, and they're pretty useful. Jeffrey, and then Stuart.
When we're talking about
real quickly too, because we're going to go into like a minute per answer. Go ahead.
We're talking like musical instruments, so you probably do want to connect up a microphone or something like that. I suggest looking at the IK multimedia line for audio, because that could help if it plugs into a computer or even a phone. You'll have a direct mic.
There you go, Stuart. Same thing. Yep. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Okay, another PTZ question. Back to Mickey. Client is asking for PTZ thermal cameras. Are there any?
FLIR is the, they license the sensor and they make sensors, but FLIR, I believe, is they're the guys that do all the thermal stuff that I know of. Next question.
A Mickey PTZ again. What would be the go-to solution to transport video feeds and PTZ control to and from the cameras that are 300 to 500 meters away? Would turning the video into an NDI system be best, so that video and control can run on a single fiber line?
Go ahead, Mike, real quick.
Those IP cameras can connect to Mimo Live, and Hikvision does have the thermal cameras and all kinds of different arrangements, including PTZ. So, but Mimo Live can read RTSP, so you can just plug it right in and use that for your input on all of those security cameras.
Yeah, some kind of IP connection over fiber, I think, would definitely get you to most of those controls. Jeffrey, and then Beju, 15 seconds each.
You can use NDI. You don't need to use it for your video, but you can definitely use it in the studio monitor. You can control your PTZs that way.
All right, Beju, quick.
Yeah, if you end up using industrial cameras, just getting a good outdoor NVR network recorder would help, because most of them, especially even the Hikvision ones, have remote access solutions built in. And most of these industrial cameras have RTSP streaming built into that. So you can just use a network switch to use that. You need to use NDI.
Any last thing, Mickey?
Yeah. Do these like high-end cameras typically send these RTSP streams, or do they have like a BNC out, SDI out?
It's going to be it's twisted pair Ethernet. Usually, it's IP. It'll be ONVIF or RSTP.
But say on the higher end of things, like thinking about the $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 range, whatever.
They do. The Sony and the Panasonic both have NDI via license and RTSP built in. The new Panasonic has SRT as well as NDI built in.
Also, quickly on the surveillance camera end, check out Axis. They offer a locally deployable and hostable server for control and receipt of the stream and control of the PTZ head.
Also look at Marshall. They have CCUs for their smaller cameras, and so you all your outputs, it's talking directly over to the camera, and then it's the video spigots are coming out in a box that's right next to you, as opposed to the camera. Next question.
Tim McKean says, are there certain generations of GoPros that can also stream without a capture card?
Stuart?
And I was slow on the unmute. Yes, Hero 3 can, but it is only HD. Hero 4 onwards can't, but there is a new firmware for Hero 8 that does via USB.
Perfect. Bill?
If you have really old GoPro cameras too, some of them have HDMI out that work directly into the ATEM Mini. So it's a nice, cheap solution.
Really?
Yeah, I have Hero 2s that I'm working on getting integrated into this.
Yeah, anything with that. A lot of them have. I have a ton of Heroes that I'm trying to figure out how to use because or get rid of them or whatever, because I Hero 3s and 4s because of all the spherical stuff I did. They're still sitting in a box, in a pile. A couple
of the 3s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk. I don't know if I need them anymore. Anyway, next question.
Okay, everybody, go to B&H. Get ready to type this in. Alex, what is your new pop-up background?
I am using a Lazulite 6-foot by 7-foot backdrop. It's a
B&H just crashed.
It's it's a spring-loaded. It's one of those ones that's like what you put on the inside of your car, except it's 6 feet wide, or 6 feet high and 7 feet wide, or 7 feet high and 6 feet wide, and it's just big enough for being 4 foot behind me and filling the screen. And it's about $150. There's a lot of cheaper ones that are a little bit smaller. It seems like a lot of them are like 5.5 and 6.5, and I almost bought them because they were like $60 instead of 150. And I was just a little concerned, and I was right that it wasn't going to be quite right. I measured it out, and I was like, oh, it's right on the edge. So for me, that's what I need. I think that there are a lot of less expensive ones. If you want to pull the screen a little closer to you, you could probably get away with the 5.5 and 6.5. And at that rate, the gray ones. This is gray on one side, white on the other. So I'm thinking of getting one of these and tearing it apart and putting gray on one side and then composite components on the other side, so that I have a really nice green screen and a gray one that I can travel with. But I haven't, it's one of those weekend projects for the weekends that I'm not working, which hasn't happened for a while.
When you say spring loaded, do you mean
it's not spring loaded? It's got a metal.
It's got a little rim around it, right? But it doesn't have a stand, so you have to lean it up against the wall or something, right?
It doesn't. You can get ones that you can get a kit with a stand, and there's someone had shown there's a little thing that'll pop on top of a C stand or a light stand that has actual magnets that'll just snap to it. And I think someone showed it one of the other days.
It was Ishai showing it off.
Yeah, Ishai was showing that off. So it's pretty useful there. Go ahead, Bill, 15 seconds, because we're going to have to now burn through a bunch of questions.
Yeah, I'll go faster than that. The one I'm using is from Savage, and the thing about it is it has a very thick rim. The metal rim around it is at least a half an inch thick. Look for that.
Yep. Next question.
Laura Seal says, sometimes you do use Skype over Zoom or a single connection. Why do you do that over Zoom?
Video quality and audio quality are higher in Skype than they are in Zoom. And that's why we do it. They're higher than anything else. Unfortunately, the Microsoft continues to destroy the product. So all the usability of the product is very low. But the actual video quality and audio quality, and I have to say it every time someone brings up Skype, that it's just like the most amazing failure I've ever seen any company execute. You have first to market, best video, best audio, and they ruin the product. Like how do you even do that? The only thing I can think of is they're trying to push people into Teams.
Okay.
Let's
bring your blood pressure down.
So anyway, so I don't pick Skype because it's better as an overall product. I pick it because we need audio and video. We are going to experiment with Zoom and vMix. vMix is coming up to speed this week, and Zoom, because of the notes that we got last week, the idea that if we just go into a business account that we can get 720p and possibly 1080p on the second screen for all one-to-ones has us planning to experiment with Zoom as a replacement for Skype for one-to-one for the point-to-points that we're using. And we didn't know that. That was given by someone who is in the know, is in our group, that if you have a business account and you do a point-to-point connection with them, the second window on your window will always be 720p. And if you make requests, you might be able to get it to 1080, much like the room that Guy was talking about, but you just need a business account, which means you have to buy 10 accounts, which means starts at $200 a month to be able to do that. But we're going to try it.
A single account is $200 a month?
The business account is a minimum of 10. Oh. So you have to buy 10 accounts just to have that capability.
And 10 accounts cost $200 a month?
Mm-hmm. So for $200 a month, theoretically, we can get that point-to-point out. And then if we can, then you send in a request for a 1080p connection, and then you go from there. Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
There is a nonprofit opportunity there. I'll look into it.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on. Martin Reutman says, can you post or give the names of the poetry that you recite when you do your sound check, Alex?
It's a very obscure poet that I use that you probably haven't heard of. His name's William Shakespeare, and he wrote a couple little ditties in the 17th century. What I say is it's a monologue from Henry V. It's probably in the first 20 minutes it's in the first act when he gets a bunch of tennis balls from the Dauphin. So anyway, so that's I had to play that a long time ago, Henry V, and so it was a tape deck that I can turn on. So it's just that it's a long monologue. I have a couple of Henry V monologues because when I'm testing audio, I can sit there and I don't have to think about it. It just comes out of my mouth while I'm working, and so it's just easier to use. It's a tape deck that is always with me. So
there's words seeping out of your mouth hole.
Exactly. It is.
Martin Reutman also says on the tech front, is the NDI app to connect the iPhone to the Mac free? think it's very cheap if it's not.
It's like $8, I think.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Next question.
A. Mitchell says, how do people feel about using a DI box as an interface to connect a 3.5 millimeter stereo mini unbalanced audio input jack to the i10 Mini Pro?
I hate them, but you know they're unbalanced, and if there's a buzz in a production, the first place I'll go is to the playback operator and see if he's got a pod DI. It is like I literally will just go to that person and find my buzz, and I unplug it, and immediately it goes away 90% of the time. It doesn't go away 100% of the time, but 90% of the time there's somebody has a pod DI in my chain because of unbalanced outputs. Jeff and then Jeff. Oh yeah, Jeff and then Greg. Real quick, we're gonna run a little heavy, but almost.
Yeah, so far using the A10 Mini Pro line and mic inputs, I would say don't. I haven't had good success using them with any kind of interface, but a DI is not the right box because DI is going to take instrument level down to mic level. I know some of them can take in a line level, but you don't want to go down to mic if you're already at line and the input's line. You just want to get the best interface you can between those two as far as cabling unbalanced output to unbalanced input.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Typically, anytime you see an 1/8 inch or RCA plugs, you're dealing with consumer line level, which is -10. Yeah. Okay. So any reasonable mixer ought to have two RCA outs, which is at -10. Two RCA plugs to your stereo mini. Plug it in. Goodbye.
I will do almost everything I can to avoid unbalanced signals in my chain. And so if you have to, I don't use I believe that in the Mini Pro, to really be pro, I'm hoping that the next version of it puts 2 little TA3s in there rather than the junk that's in there right now. I would rather go into a camera and use the audio from the camera, like just embed it, with an XLR input or whatever that you have in one of your cameras and get the audio in that way, then go through the Mini. And if, as we're talking about outputs, still after all these years, the gold standard for output for me is a USB Pre 2. It's expensive, but it is all the control you need. It doesn't have any software. It just shows up. It's got little dip switches on the back, and you're going to get the best, in my opinion, the best audio other than Dante if you have a Dante network. But if you're doing analog out of a computer, that's the best tool to do it with. Next question.
Michael Vosbein says, spell that, please.
That, T-H-A-T.
Moving on. Sorry, Michael, I don't know what you're referring to. And then one more from Michael, the Zoom, we're thinking the same thing. Zoom Q2N will go USB or HDMI. I don't know that that's actually a question or a statement, but we're done.
Okay. We've made it to the bottom of the hour, and we're not stopping. If you're watching on YouTube, we're not stopping. We're just going to keep going. We're just going to keep talking here. So now we've cleared the deck, and there's a little bit of an experiment, as far as the visual effects. I don't have a presentation. I don't have a process, much like the education one. This is a place for folks to ask questions or discuss more visual effects related or graphics related questions. And it can be a little bit broadcast graphics, as well as visual effects and compositing and those types of things. We're trying to open it up there, and we're going to see what kind of questions come up. And we're trying to figure out whether this is whether a second hour related to visual effects makes sense. The funny thing about this, as just a start, is that when we started the Pixel Core, it was all visual effects because I had just come out of working on Star Wars. And so everyone who followed and joined was really interested in visual effects. And it was everything I could do to get people to talk about video and live video and audio. I was like, we have to talk about all these things. We can't just talk about visual effects. And everyone was always like leaning towards the visual effects. And why are we talking about all these other things? And now I'm wondering whether visual effects is something we should add. So anyway, we're figuring that out right now. But if you've got questions about compositing or graphics or real time, this is kind of an open forum, and it could end up being a really short hour. And I'll let you guys all go if we run out of things to say. We've never had that before, but I no questions are showing up, and people are just like, I don't know what to do with that. Or we'll just open it up to more open questions if we run out of visual effects questions. Chris, and then Chris Comfort, Chris Frishy, and then Chris Comfort.
Yeah, I
So many
just wanted to
Chris's.
take a second, if possible, to answer your green screen question since it's VFX related. But if you buy those two pop-ups, you were talking about cannibalizing one and making a gray and a green on the backside. If you just open those up and run those through your machine, you're going to burn about 1.5 inches all the way around that thing. But if you sew those together and then cut the band off of the green screen, you'll have it on there stretched, but not out of sync. And then you can just roll that up as one. It'll be thicker, but obviously.
Well, I'm trying to put it back into the. I'm trying to put it all back into the twisty. You know,
You'll be able to do that because it'll be sewn to the gray one. You only have
right.
one band, but don't try to cut it and then sew it on because that won't work. Trust me.
Well, you have to. Well, yeah, you definitely have to sew them together. So you cut it. What my plan was to pull it out, set the gray one down, and use it as a form to cut the green, and then sew them together.
No, don't do that.
So what did you do?
Open it up, the gray one up, and then buy a green one and open it up, and then put the green, back to back. Then run that through your sewing machine with them open and stretched. Then cut the band off the green one.
The problem is that you can't buy a green one that has the green that I want. That's the challenge. So, and I haven't been able to persuade Composite Components to build a pop-out one. They have a Lycra, so they have the Lycra that I need for it to do it. So I just gotta, it's one of those. It's a little shop project.
Get with me later. I've been sewing for 20 years, so I might be able to help you out.
Okay, yeah, because my two little art projects are building that background that I can flip that has the composite component green for whatever reason is just way better than everybody else's green. It's better than the Elgato. It's better than it's better than all the other green screens that we use, Roscoe and everything else. And I don't quite understand why. I get ones that look very close to the same color, and it just keys a lot better. And so, so it really makes a difference. And so I'm trying